Welcome to aleister-nacht's Satanic audio blog. This week, greed. Greed has been around for a long time, practically since the beginning of time. As humans, greed and desire play a large role in our motivation and pursuits. I suppose a certain amount of desire must be present in order for a person to undertake and succeed at any endeavor. However, when does desire morph into pure greed, and how does a healthy motivation turn into an addiction or a powerful emotional trait? Greed is defined as an excessive desire, especially for wealth and possessions. Avarice is a synonym that is often used to describe greed. A child's attention is always drawn and held by things that appeal to their sense of desire, and in some cases, with toddlers, a certain amount of coveting as well. Their attention is held by the idea of having, holding, and or possessing an object that may be just beyond their reach. As children grow older, they naturally begin to transform from fascination and infatuation to greed and envy, simply wanting what others have, and the urge to obtain that which is just beyond their reach by any means possible. When greed and instant gratification are combined, a reaction process begins. The person wants what belongs to another and is willing to do whatever it takes to take it away. This is not limited to tangible possessions, but also includes people as well. For some, controlling another is the ultimate reward of greed and envy. Forcing a person to adhere to the dictates of another is not only emotionally satisfying for some people, but it is also paramount in the scheme of greed. Not having to ask or receive permission for anything, including physical contact, is the very definition of emotional, psychological, and physical control, and thus owning and possessing the object of desire. The control aspect simply feeds the greed. When a strong-willed person exerts control over a weaker person, they are not only able to take advantage of them and take possession of that person, but they can hold that person as an emotional hostage. Nothing is more desirable for a psychopath, predator, or a cult. I believe crime is driven by this. The first of the deadly sins. The desires for ownership of what another person has is an urge which those predisposed to violence will be unable to resist. A person usually returns cognitively to what was learned during the first few years of development, and if the moral conscience was never developed, this person will simply act on their animalistic impulse, even at the expense of another's safety. The law of nature as such will be kill or be killed. The absence of a conscience is not specific to modern society, and all humans have experienced this trait at one time or another. How can a person endure another and not experience remorse? Human feelings or sympathy are natural. However, sometimes conscience is a handicap that humans should try to control. Sometimes conscience is a trait that religion can and often does exploit. This lack of a conscience, while difficult to properly diagnose, is a common denominator found in most serial killers, psychopaths, and sociopaths. In most cases, the person has been exposed to some type of emotional and/or physical trauma at an early age. Because of this trauma, the feeling of remorse or emotional connection with the victim is absent. The serial killer views its victim simply as a possession and does not have the ability to see the victim as a person with feelings and emotions. This self-removal and emotional disconnect from the victim allows the killer to accomplish the desired tasks without any regard or sympathy. Personality disorder is characterized by a lack of regard for the moral or legal standards in the local culture. There is a marked inability to get along with others or abide by societal rules. Individuals with this disorder are sometimes called psychopaths or sociopaths. Surprisingly, it is estimated that almost half of the entire population are sociopaths. In her book, The Sociopath Next Door, Martha Stout gives a very in-depth description of a sociopath who blends into the camouflage of society, lacking basic human feelings such as sympathy and empathy, and functioning with those around them being none the wiser of their true motives. They are the people next door, metaphorically speaking. Without a conscience, these individuals set a new standard for greed. In discussions, I have heard opinions that allude to modern society becoming more violent and radical in action. I do not totally agree with this, and I believe the media amplifies certain behavior, example, criminal, and so we are bombarded constantly with visual images of the underbelly of society. Are people more violent in our modern age? Some believe so. I do not agree with that line of thought. I believe humans have always been capable of egregious acts of savagery toward one another. Throughout history, civilizations have murdered, raped, and abused one another and justified their actions with religious rhetoric and/or God-based doctrines. More blood has been spilled in the name of religion and God than any other subject in the entire history of man. Some of these gruesome acts found throughout history suggest people have always been willing and more than able to do the unthinkable to one another. So I do not blame today's human condition on modern times. I do believe that these events are more readily available for viewing and mass consumption by our ever-present and agenda-driven media. People are living at a breakneck pace and still expecting more and more. Is this necessarily a bad thing? Do you like to wait for some incompetent to take your meal order, etc.? Perhaps patience, or the lack thereof, can be tied to greed because greed pushes a person to their mental and physical limits. It would seem to make sense that a person blowing the car horn and tailgating wants something from the other driver. They want them to get out of their way and they want it now. The human side always wants to go on the offensive and settle a matter physically, putting them in place. And yes, I am human, and I do have thoughts of hostility when someone wrongs me. No one wants to be a victim, and no one wants to be a fool. That is human nature. Does it seem natural to let someone hurt you while doing nothing to defend yourself? Or does it feel more appropriate to punch them in the mouth, metaphorically speaking? Is it true that the youth of today is lacking when it comes to respecting their elders, for instance? I also heard this point made as an argument. I notice through unqualified and non-clinical observations, a large percentage of today's teenagers do not use the same terms of respect that my group, especially my age, used, like yes sir and no sir. Usage of words such as please and thank you seem to be just totally obsolete and in decline. Bad manners aside, it appears that communication as a whole is rapidly changing and becoming a lost art form. With the advent of internet and social websites and accelerated communication paths, human interaction is becoming much more impersonal. The methodology of communication and sentence structure has been reduced to a few indiscernible keyboard characters, which cannot be read later by anyone except the person who read the message in the first place. This message is quickly typed and sent via microblogs for the whole world to read if they can. It seems technology, though a tool of gratification, is also isolating people into mass communication silos. The power of technological advances is truly impressive and overwhelming, yet empty in its human attachment and interaction. As society evolves through the application of these tools, it is interesting to imagine what the future of society will hold. What will the appearance be like? And how will that communication take place? Thank you for joining. This is aleister-nacht, and until next time, hail Satan.